Continuing section 10.1, talking about completing the square. So now that we have an equation to solve, we do need to follow all of the steps mentioned in the previous video, where the very first thing I need to do is move this 4 to the other side of the equals. And I'm also going to kind of write my problem with a space in it. I'm going to leave a space after that 8n. And it's going to equal -4 because I subtracted the 4 to the other side. I left this space on purpose because the process of completing the square, I'm going to be adding in a new number. And I need space to write that. That new number that I'm going to add in, you take that 8 divided by 2, which is 4. And then 4 squared is 16. So I'm going to add 16 to both sides of the equation. It's very important to remember to keep that equation balanced by adding the same number to both sides. So then I'm going to take this and factor it, and that's going to be n plus 4 squared equals -4 plus 16 is 12, and then solve by taking the square root, just like we did in the last video in the first example. So we have n plus 4 equals plus or minus 12 is 4 times 3. And then I'm going to move this 4 to the other side. We have -4 plus or minus, and that's going to be 2, square root of 3. And that's all the more I can do. I cannot put the 4 and the 2 together because this 2 is attached to the square root of 3. They're not like terms. So if you have to write it separately, that's your answer. Part B, same process. We are going to have a little bit of a different ending here because we have a number in front of the x squared. So I have 3x squared plus 6x, leave a space, equal to -5. And then I mentioned it on the steps earlier that if you have a number in front of the x squared, you have to divide everything by that number. So we have x squared plus 2x equals -5/3. Leave it as a fraction. Decimals are not going to be accurate here because you'd have to round. And then go through completing the square. So 2 divided by 2 equals 1. 1 squared equals 1, so I'm going to add 1 to each side. So now I have x plus 1 squared equals -5/3 plus 1 is going to be -2/3. Square root. So we have x plus 1 equals plus or minus I, square root of 2/3. So then I have to subtract the 1. Also, the square root of 2/3. I can't leave it like this. I have to rationalize it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go square root of 2 over square root of 3. Multiply by square root of 3 over square root of 3. I square root of 6 over 3. And then write it as 2 separate answers if you need to in MyLabs. Part C, moving that 9 to the other side. Completing the square. So I'm going to be adding 16 to each side of the equation. So we have z minus 4 squared equals 7. Square root each side. And then add 4. And then nothing else simplifies, so I just have my 2 answers. D is another one where we have a number in the front. So first I'm going to move the 1 over to the other side. And then I'm going to divide everything by 2 so that I just have q squared. And then it's 3q equaling 1/2. Completing the square, I have a fraction again. 3 over 2 squared is 9 over 4. So I'm going to add 9 over 4. And when I factor this, I know it's q plus 3/2, because that's always that number. And then that's going to equal 11 over 4. Square root of both sides. So the square root of 11 over square root of 4. And then subtract 3/2. So negative 3/2 plus or minus the square root of 11 over 2. And then just write it as 2 separate. Alright, so this is what we have. And the next step is going to be the Pythagorean theorem. The next type of problem is going to be the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem is with right triangles. So on a right triangle, we have our legs, A and B. Our hypotenuse is C. And it says C squared equals A squared plus B squared. So the hypotenuse is always the longest side, the one that's across from the right angle. So in our right triangle, find the missing length, give exact answers, and a decimal approximation. So I'm going to substitute the A and the B, solve it out. Square root of each side. 52 is 4 times 13. No plus or minus this time, it's only the positive answer because we're looking at a length of a side of a triangle. So this right here is our exact answer. For the decimal approximation, you're just going to take a calculator and you're going to take 2 multiplied by the square root of 13, which is rounded to 2 decimal places, 7.21. On part B, we substitute in the values we have. I'm solving for B this time. Subtract 16. Square root of each side. Again, no plus or minus sign because it's a side length. 84 is 4 and 21. So I have 2 square root of 21. This is my exact answer. Take a calculator and round it to 2 decimal places for 9.17 as the approximate answer. Now we do have a couple of word problems coming up, but I want to take my time on another section, another video with those.